AI doom really drives me crazy. In addition to being harmful and frightening to the public, there's nothing to it. It's a complete category error. It's a misclassification, a malformed thesis, which is difficult to debate because it's not just factually wrong. It creates an entire fictional universe of absurdity in order to actually be viable at all. And almost everyone who's pushing the idea is a complete grifter. They claim to be experts in AI or AI safety, but none of them really are. But then you do have a few people who do seem to have credibility and expertise in the field, and chief amongst them is Geoffrey Hinton. He's been all over the place, very prolific. He's doing every interview he can and telling the world that the AI that he created might endanger humanity and something must be done to stop it. How do you refute somebody like that? The answer is you really can't, because he's not basing his arguments on logic or facts. He's just saying, hey, I'm an authority figure and I say so, so you should believe me. But when you actually know what happened with Geoffrey Hinton, the story changes a lot. It's actually a very sad story, and I'd like to offer you an insider's perspective that you won't get elsewhere. You see, Hinton resigned from Google in 2023 to pursue his media campaign, his blitz of podcasts and interviews about AI doom and his warning. But when he was at Google, he never raised these concerns. I know that because I was an independent contractor there working on AI risk and AI safety, and my team and I were in charge of writing the report that would have the risks that Google needed to worry about before bringing AI to the market. And we talked to many scientists and researchers and managers at Google. We looked at the available evidence, and yeah, we did find risks. There were concerns. Malfunction, security, malicious use, that the AI's output might be misinterpreted. There were liabilities, and there were potential unknowns going on here because it was new tech. But we never heard anything about any of these doomsday existential risks. No researchers, and there were some very intelligent researchers, the best in the world, ever took any of this seriously. Hinton never came to my team. He never came to anybody on the Google internal team. These concerns never percolated through the culture and were never echoed by anyone else there. Instead, Hinton was entirely quiet, and he knew about the technology because it existed in prototype form for months or years before it was released to the public. He said nothing. He did nothing. He went right along until the day he resigned and went to the media. This left people shocked and bewildered. Sure, he would claim later that he didn't have the opportunity at Google, but he certainly did. The Google I know was a Google that was very tolerant of dissent. There were a lot of people in AI development with diverse, even strange opinions, and Google welcomed that. It was an academic kind of company, a company that did in fact care about safety and took it very seriously. So much so that Google had, in the past, terminated entire AI development cycles for things like behavioral modeling or facial recognition or things that might be used as weapons that they felt just weren't good for society. So when you actually understand the context, you realize that Geoffrey Hinton had every opportunity to come forward. So what happened, and why did he just leave and blitz the media? Well, there's another side to this, and that is this. Hinton did create backpropagation. He was a giant in ML, but his career had moved on. In his older years, he had become more of a lecturer, a kind of elder statesman, not directly involved in the science and development. And when generative AI exploded onto the scene, the people who did get the attention, who did have their product and technology capture the public's attention and be all over the media with billions of dollars of investment, that's a newer, younger generation. Hinton had very little to do with natural language processing and generative AI. Most of the guys who do that are in their 20s and 30s, some of them in their 40s, but few much older than that, and Hinton's in his 70s. When you realize that, you can start to see the tragedy of Geoffrey Hinton and exactly what's going on here. There are plenty of other examples of people who should and did know better, who had career drift or actually going into strange areas later in life. There's a term for this. It's not official, but it's called senior megalomania, or sometimes senile megalomania. And examples of this include people like General Curtis LeMay, the architect of nuclear deterrence doctrine and the head of the Strategic Air Command, who later, after retirement, espoused increasingly alarmist and apocalyptic views of nuclear war being inevitable or even necessary. People like Kerry Mullins, who invented PCR and went on to claim that HIV was not the cause of AIDS. People like James Watson, co-discoverer of DNA structure, who went on to espouse a lot of racist views and debunked ideas of genetic IQ links that make some races have lower intelligence than others. And we've seen this before. It's not even that uncommon. The best example, the one that science historians and people like sociologists and psychologists look to, that would be Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling was a brilliant Nobel laureate. He was somebody who revolutionized the way we think of biochemical reactions, but later in life, he skewed to the extreme with his unhinged beliefs and claims that vitamin C was a miracle cure-all for cancer or heart disease, something like that. What these cases all have in common are a few things. These are people who were generally standard bearers in their field, people who were the adults in the room, those who were really the ones you go to for the prime expertise. And they were people who began to age out of rapidly growing fields where the torch was passed to a newer, younger generation. People who felt the need to reestablish their reputation and didn't want to feel like they were being passed by or were no longer important. There's concerns about legacy and mortality that creep in here. And that's really what drives this sort of behavior and this sort of departure from reality. And when you understand that, it starts to make sense what happened with Geoffrey Hinton. It really does. His claims about AI risk have gotten increasingly extreme and far less grounded as time has gone on. Some of the things that he has said is that he thinks AI is conscious because AI has a subjective experience. And how does he qualify that? Well, if humans can hallucinate pig elephants that aren't really there, that means they have a subjective experience. If you connect an AI system to a camera and put a prism in front of the camera, it will see something that isn't really there. It will see the object off to the side. Therefore, it has a subjective experience. I don't think I need to explain the logical leaps here to show that that's really not something that holds a lot of water as an argument, yet he's made it with a completely straight face. He's also said that AI needs to get maternal instincts because that's the only way it will protect humanity. It's actually kind of comical. Do you really want your chatbot to tell you it doesn't like that girl you're seeing and to eat your vegetables and get plenty of sleep? Yeah, it's unhinged, and to those in the know, actual AI ML developers, really leaves them scratching their heads. But once you understand what's going on here, becomes really apparent how sad the situation is. For Hinton, he went his entire career being somebody who was very important to ML, but ML was never something that gained all that much of attention outside of academia. Certainly didn't get all kinds of funding, and it wasn't part of the press. But by recasting himself as not just the godfather of AI, but as a prophet of doom who's there to give you his wisdom, he's reclaimed a lot of relevance, and he's managed to get the attention that he never got during the heyday of his career. And it's really sad. It's really sad because he's not an idiot. He's somebody of great accomplishments who could have basically written his legacy on what he actually did for the field, and people would have respected and looked up to him. But at this point, most people who work in AI really think he's a complete crank, and that's just too bad. But as I said, the tragedy of Geoffrey Hinton is not unique to Geoffrey Hinton. We have seen it elsewhere. It's also worth noting that his wife died in 2018, and shouldn't underestimate the price that has on somebody's life when they suddenly are living alone without a grounding influence. That's kind of just speculation, but what I do know is true. What I can tell you for an absolute unequivocal fact is that Google Labs was exactly the kind of place where any kind of concern, even unusual ones, could be brought up. It was the kind of place where academic level theoretical discussion was the norm, not the exception. And it was somewhere where Geoffrey Hinton quietly operated for years without ever bringing these concerns to anyone's attention. Not mine, not my team's, not the internal folks at Google, not his colleagues. And that's what you need to know to understand exactly what happened with Geoffrey Hinton.
So I'm going to now show you a multimodal chatbot, just show you on a slide, a multimodal chatbot having a subjective experience. So I take this multimodal chatbot, and it's got a camera, it's got a robot arm, and it can see. So I train it up, and I put an object in front of it, and I say, point at the object. Points at the object, no problem. I then put a prism in front of its lens, and when it's not looking. And I put an object in front of it, and say, point at the object, and it points over there. And I say, no, that's not where the object is. The object is actually straight in front of you. But I put a prism in front of your lens. And the chatbot says, oh, I see. The prism bent the light rays, so the object's actually there, but I had the subjective experience it was there. Now, if it uses the word subjective experience in that way, it's using them exactly like we use them. So a chatbot that said that would have had the subjective experience that it was there. The prism messed with its perceptual system. It wanted to tell you what was going on in its perceptual system, and the way it could tell you is by telling you what would have had to be in the world had we not messed with its perceptual system. That's what it's telling the chatbot. Okay, so my claim is multimodal chatbots already have subjective experiences.
About the first part of this statement, that huge doses of vitamins just produce extensive urine, I investigated that with respect to vitamin C 20 years ago. When I was taking 10 grams per day of vitamin C, I collected my urine for 24 hours and analyzed it. I found that I was eliminating 15% of the 10 grams. That is 1.5 grams in my urine. But most of the vitamin C was being converted in the body into other substances which I know have much value. So the statement which I still see published by commentators, even a few physicians or medical or nutritional authorities, that if you take more than 150 milligrams of vitamin C in a day, you just eliminate all of the rest of what you have taken in the urine, is just not true.